Welcome to A Celtic State of Mind. I'm Paul John Dykes, and today I'm delighted to be joined by Natasha Meikle. We do expect also, Natasha, for Lawrence to join us. We just don't know where he is at the moment. So we'll run as a duo until Lawrence joins us for the treble. There's plenty to talk about. The first thing I want to do, because I've been meaning to talk about this all week, and we always kind of run over time, is a wee update on the Celtic's women's team, Natasha, because there is a big game tomorrow night, massive game actually. We're playing the league leaders who are going for 14 titles in a row. So bring us up to date since we last covered the game, Natasha.
Okay, when we last spoke, I think Celtic were 2 points behind Rangers and 5 points behind Glasgow City. The top two spots are key in the Women's League because they're the Champions League spots. And what we really see in the Women's League is that the top three teams, really, Glasgow City, Rangers, Celtic, are quite far ahead of the rest. Hibs are sort of clinging on in there, but they are quite far ahead of the rest. So the games against each other are really, really important. Celtic getting that win against Rangers a couple of weeks back was massive. That cut the deficit to 2 points on Rangers. And what we saw happen at the weekend was Glasgow City and Rangers play each other. So Celtic won their game against Motherwell earlier in the day, and then Glasgow City beat Rangers. So Celtic are now 1 point ahead of Rangers in second, still behind Glasgow City, but that second spot is absolutely massive if Celtic are going to get Champions League football next season, which would be an absolutely fantastic result for the girls this season. Celtic do have a big game coming up. Celtic now have to play Glasgow City. It will be a tough one. There's no getting around that. Glasgow City are a very, very strong team. Like you've said, Paul, they are going for 14 in a row for the season. Obviously, if Rangers win their game and Celtic don't beat Glasgow City, the position's reverse. But all Celtic can do is go out and keep winning. That's 7 in a row now for the girls. So someone's got to beat Glasgow City this season. So why not Celtic? They're on a great run. They're playing some really good football. They're scoring goals. So if they can get a result up against Glasgow City next, that would be absolutely fantastic. So fingers crossed for that.
It will. It would be brilliant. And I mean, we will talk about this, but next season we could be following three teams wearing the hoops, the normal team, the men's team, the women's team, and also the Colts, and we'll have a wee chat about that. But tomorrow night, Celtic State of Mind will cover the St Johnstone game half an hour before kick-off as normal, but there is a staggered kick-off with the women's game, so we'll be able to give you updates at half-time and at full-time, and then we'll stay a wee bit later and give you the full-time roundup of the women's game as well. Massive game. Like you say, Champions League football at stake for the top two. It looks as though Glasgow City will be one of those teams, but Celtic could go out there and get a result tomorrow night. And I know that Fran Alonso's got his own wee cult following, Russell Boyce being one of them. I look forward to it. I really do. I actually do look forward to it. And we're keeping an eye on the game the other day against Motherwell when we done the Sunday Bulletin as well. So something to look forward to. But we will be engaging with as many comments as possible, because there is a headline, why Wednesday would be ideal for Celtic's Eddie Howe announcement. Now, we are hearing at A Celtic State of Mind that Wednesday's a big day. Natasha, I'm not going to make a great deal about that, because we probably could have given a date every single week for the last 8 weeks. There's so much information flying about. But it does seem to be an open secret, certainly in amongst the kind of media, that Eddie Howe's a done deal, and it's just a matter of when. So do you think it'll be this week?
Well, if I had a pound for every time that I was told it was this week, then yeah, I don't know. I think that it does seem to be a case of when rather than if. I think the deal is done. I think that the final pieces of the jigsaw are being put into place, and there will be an announcement imminently. Whether that's Wednesday, Thursday, next week, who knows? It's got to the stage that I think the fans are almost, whenever it'll be now. Of course we want it sooner rather than later, but I think we're almost accepting of the fact that, he's not going to come in until the summer anyway. But the sooner we hear an announcement, the better. It just stops the speculation. It stops the endless questioning of when it's going to happen. And while the media certainly portray and the fans certainly think that it is a done deal, the longer it's not confirmed as a done deal, that more the doubt starts to sort of creep in, and there's that lingering concern that something could go wrong at the last minute. We've seen it with Celtic before. The last time we tried to sign David Turnbull, when we tried to sign Ivan Toney, things happen at the last minute with Celtic. So until the announcement is made, you have to sort of temper your expectations a little. So I'm hopeful it's happening soon. I'm cautiously optimistic until we see it in black and white on the Celtic website. But is it tomorrow? We shall see.
Well, the thing is, there's this big thing these days. There's so many outlets that there's some people try and sell themselves off as in the know. And there are undoubtedly people out there who are getting good information from good sources. So you've got to manage that, and you've got to manage your own expectations, because as you say, we're at that point, Natasha, where you do want it to happen so that you can actually look further ahead into next season. And JP every Thursday is on the countdown for the first fixture. And we do need a rebuild, which we'll be talking about today as well. But yeah, there is a hint, there has been mention that Wednesday is going to be the big Wednesday, which actually, it made me think back to, believe this or not, back in the 90s, I think it was, there was a band from Scotland called Big Wednesday, and they released a song called Sliding In Like Migraine. That was their single, Sliding In Like Migraine. And I remember Danny McGrain being on the front cover of the single, this Scottish band. So is it going to be a big Wednesday? If so, dig that song out tomorrow on YouTube. It might actually happen whilst we're on air, which would be which would be interesting as well. But another thing, and I don't think it's the whole reason for it, it may certainly be the reason for the scheduling of the fans forum, but there is a fans forum taking place on Thursday night, or is it Thursday afternoon maybe actually, maybe 4 o'clock, and Dominic Mackay will be addressing the fans, and it will be I think it's a Teams dial-in kind of meeting. So Dominic Mackay will be speaking to Celtic fans on Thursday. I think he'd get a much easier ride of it if we have announced Eddie the previous day, Natasha.
Oh, I mean, absolutely. I have known them to cancel these fans forums very last minute, and like this one, they arranged them very last minute as well, which makes me think the timing is on purpose. They don't arrange these things without thinking about the timing. They don't cancel them without thinking about the timing. This is what makes me think that there is a specific reason for it being on the Thursday. I could be well wide of the mark. This is pure speculation. But imagine how they could take the wind out of the sails of this fans forum if they come in with a massive announcement on Wednesday. Picture the situation where they don't have a manager in place by the time the fans forum comes around. Mackay and whoever else is attending that forum on behalf of Celtic is going to get a seriously hard time from the fans in terms of lack of engagement, lack of communication, lack of progress. The questions will all be centred around who's the next manager, why have we heard nothing, what's the delay. If they come in with a big announcement tomorrow, those questions are gone. They've taken the wind out of the sails of those fans with these serious complaints about the fact we've taken so long to appoint a manager. That's the fans' key criticism. Yeah. If they can remove that, Dominic gets a much easier time at his first fans forum. Maybe we're reading too much into it, but if I was in Dominic's position, that's what I would want to do.
Definitely. I'm going to bring in our esteemed colleague to make it a treble, because we used to be good at trebles, and it's Lawrence Connolly. Lawrence, welcome to the show.
Mate, it's a pleasure to be on again. How are the pair of the both of you?
It looks as though you're in a courtroom. That's what it looks like. It sounds like that as well.
It's a boardroom, mate.
A boardroom, right. Is it the boardroom?
It's not, mate, not yet. Actually,
one day.
What you've missed is we had a wee update from Natasha on the women's game. Obviously, there's a big match tomorrow night, and we'll be covering it on the ACSOM Bulletin, the match day stuff tomorrow night. But we're also talking about the fact that we've heard, ACSOM has heard, that Wednesday's the big day this week. We don't know what to read into that, but we're starting to put two and two together. Fans forum on Thursday. Would you expect it on Wednesday, Lawrence Connolly?
Well, I know they've got season books to sell and a tour to do, so it wouldn't surprise me if they thought, kind of, for once, try to get ahead of the problem. Because they would, if there's no manager and no announcement before their tour, they would take a fair bit of criticism. I think even if they announce the manager, really the main problem's been lack of communication. I think they've got a long way to go, haven't they? And with the communicating things. At least there was a move towards that with the email that they sent out. Whether you like the content or not, at least they were doing some effort at communicating.
They were. I was going to ask you actually, because we have discussed this time and time again, Natasha, around the lack of engagement and the communication. And some people may say you're never happy because they've communicated and you're still talking about it. I don't know email, I know it's direct, it's right into your inbox. People were complaining, non-season ticket holders got it, season ticket holders didn't, etc., etc. But it sounded as though it was a holding email. Is it a holding email for Wednesday's big announcement? Who knows? Do you think that's an effective form of communication, the one that they sent out?
I do sympathise with the club in a way, because we've had various forms of communication. We had the video from Peter Lawwell. We didn't like that. We had the question and answer from Dermot Desmond that was put on the club website. Didn't like that. We had an email sent out to all the season ticket holders, or maybe all the fans, I think. Didn't like that. So I'm struggling. I get why they would struggle to see what they do next. I mean, I could suggest what they do next. It would be to come on some form of fan media like this. What better way to engage with a massive section of the support than to come on a show like this one and talk to fans and engage directly with fans, comments, things like that. That to me would be the ultimate way of engaging with the fans. In the meantime, they're going to continue to try various methods and probably get criticised for them. But
I think why they're getting criticised is because they've not done it as a one-off. They're only choosing one channel. You need to go where your audience is. If your audience is in multiple channels, you need to use the multiple channels at the one time. Don't go, this is just going to be email, or that didn't work, this is just going to be video. Be an agile organisation. Right, we're going to send an email on this. What's a video communication? What's an interview? What's a press release? All round about the one thing. It really seems kind of really piecemeal just now.
It does.
Just an email. Well, what's your strategy? Some of your audience are on emails because you'll know how many have signed up and how many have ticked the box saying don't contact me by email. So straight away you'll know what percentage of your audience you're not speaking to. Well, why wouldn't you speak to them?
See, the big thing with that as well, Lawrence, is I did speak to someone who probably wrongly informed me that Celtic did have a database of 2.5 million. Which was made up of season ticket holders, former season ticket holders, people who have bought a ticket on a one-off basis or something from the shop, and they had a database of 2.5 million. So massive, but you would expect that from Celtic. But you ask yourself how relevant it is when you're sending out a blanket email, rather than speaking to those who are of the moment, who are topical, who are season ticket holders, or people who are tuning into fan or mainstream media for updates, of which there are millions and millions on a daily basis. So I'm pretty sure that it's all connected, and there's a few other things I'm going to talk about today that I think are connected to what you always hear, this bigger picture that Celtic are planning. And we're going to throw in quite a few things into the mix. The Celtic Colts idea, the Conor McGregor links, all this kind of stuff, and I think it all points to the bigger picture at Celtic. Now, Natasha, you are going to be leaving us a wee bit early in the bulletin today, so thank you, Lawrence, for coming in, because I would have just been talking myself. Tell us, what are you up to at the back of one today?
Yeah, so I have to shoot up early, and it will be nothing to do with the chat from Paul or Lawrence. I do have to leave slightly sharp. Heading to Celtic Park for a bit of filming with BT today, which I'm sure you'll see on your screens at some point. But always nice to have an excuse to go and see Celtic Park in the sun, isn't it?
It definitely is, and I'm not going to say exactly what it is until it's confirmed, but there might be another wee visit to a football stadium for you very shortly, Natasha, as well, representing ACSOM. So, yeah, the managerial merry-go-round continues, and we've touched on the Eddie Howe scenario, Lawrence. Patrick Murphy comes in, Paddy Murphy, with the impact of COVID and a terrible season. If it is to be Howe, will we be in a position to sufficiently back him financially? We're better off than a lot of clubs, so hopefully we spend wisely. This actually feeds into another discussion point around the strategy, the transfer strategy, and how that's going to have to change anyway, Lawrence. But on the subject of Eddie Howe, there's so many managers, and this goes back to something Natasha said earlier. Every time a manager's moved on or a club is relegated, and you're looking down south and you're hearing about rumours of managers being in the frame for certain jobs, that does concern me, because even a team that is getting relegated from the top division in England, they've got massive kind of pool in terms of finances. So you've got your parachute payment. You might try and get a manager like Eddie Howe who's out of work to come in and solve a problem. And those clubs could certainly bargain a deal much bigger than Celtic's deal. That concerns me massively. Does it come down to that for you, or do you think that when you look at Eddie Howe and where he is in his career, he really needs to look at the example of Brendan Rodgers so that he can go back into English football at a much higher level?
We've got to kind of look at it and go, what's the motivating factors for him moving? Money's going to be one of them, but what are the other factors? The level of football he's playing at, what competitions? So Champions League, he's got a chance to qualify for that. He's got a chance to win things. That's surely another motivating factor. We want a manager who wants to win. You don't want somebody that's happy to join EPL and be mid-table. Where's your ambition? Well, for me anyway, some managers may say mid-EPL is perhaps perceived by them to be higher than Celtic. But so money's a worry, but if he wants Championship football over the chance of Champions League, it's probably a wrong manager anyway.
My biggest kind of concern there would be that a lot of managers would follow the money, Natasha. And I don't think that was the sole motivation for Brendan Rodgers. I just think he wanted to go into a platform. And I also believe that he would see Leicester as a platform for his next move. I don't think he is where he wants to be. But he's seen Celtic as a platform to get to Leicester. And I think he sees Leicester as a platform to get to one of the big six, if there is such a thing, the big six clubs in England. And I think that's where Brendan Rodgers wants to be. If Eddie Howe, and I know that he's been a bit of a student of Brendan Rodgers throughout his career, if he wants to follow that path, and managers do follow other managers' paths, don't they? You look at someone like Jimmy Goodwin following the path of Jack Ross and in a very similar kind of way. But I think that if Eddie Howe wants to get to where Brendan Rodgers is right now, which is much higher than Bournemouth, where he was before, then he would need to come to a club like Celtic. Because if you go to a Crystal Palace, for example, then I fear, as Lawrence says, that you are really accepting mediocrity in terms of that division. You're going to be a bottom of the table manager. That's where you're going to be. And you might end up like someone like Sam Allardyce, who never gets relegated. In that division, anything can happen. And we've seen that this season. You may end up like an Allardyce, and then you know how quickly your stock can drop in English football. So I actually don't have any of these concerns. But then I think back to when Ronnie Deila was announced as Celtic manager, and we all knew that's because we'd gone so far down the line with other candidates, and then we were left with a decision to make, and we ended up going for our number two.
Yeah, I mean, it's a concern, isn't it? For me, similarly to players who come to Celtic to use it as a platform, look at players like Van Dijk and Dembele and Wanyama. They come to Celtic, excellent for 2, 3, 4 years, and then use that to go on and improve their career. And that's fine, because that's a model that Celtic are happy with. We nourish some of our own talent, we take some of the Scottish talent, and we bring in these players for a couple of years and then sell them on for profit. That's the model we work with. There's no harm in doing that with managers as well. It did work with Brendan Rodgers. He could have left us slightly better, we all know that. But you do get this calibre of manager in. If it is, a 2, 3, 4 year cycle before they move on to something that they class as a bigger job, then I'm fine with that. That's the sort of manager that we want to be attracting. Similarly to the players, we want players, managers who have that ability, that means that they can go and manage or play at that top level. So if that means that we do only have them for 2 or 3 years before they use it as a platform to move on, then that's the price we have to pay for that being our model. And it's fine for me, to be honest. In terms of the money and the financial side, if Celtic want it enough, they can make it happen. I'm not saying that we're anywhere close to the finances of these big teams, but they can attract these sort of managers like Howe and Rodgers if they really, really want to. If Dermot really wants to put his hand in his pocket and Howe's the man he wants, he can go out there and get him. I think he will. I think it's got so far down the line with Howe, and I think it's so widely talked about, that there would have been a leak from the club quashing it if it wasn't if it wasn't accurate.
Yeah.
We know that the club like leaking things to newspapers at the moment, apparently. They could have quashed the story if they really wanted to avoid fans' hopes getting higher and then crashing them back down, which makes me think that it is far down the line with them, and it's just a case of when.
When we're looking at the bigger picture, as I've mentioned a couple of times on the broadcast today, this does tie into that as well. And I think that when we look at things like, and we'll talk about them all individually, the Conor McGregor story, talking about investing in Celtic, buying shares from Dermot Desmond. We look at the Colts team entering into the lower reaches of Scottish football. And then we look at us targeting a manager who is of, for me, a much higher calibre than the manager who has departed the club. Then one of the promises could well be, the big thing is the British Super League. And I think that is what ties all of these things together. So if you've got someone like Conor McGregor who's worth a lot of money looking to invest, anybody investing in football right now would be looking to invest in Celtic, because your investment is going to go through the roof if Celtic are able to join the British Super League. And I've spoken to, obviously, quite recently, David Lowe about that, and various other people who are on the business side of football, who are looking at, well, if anyone invests in Celtic, it's because they want to make money. Guys like you and me, who buy some shares in Celtic, want to have that certificate on the wall to say that I own a part of my football club, and that it's all about pride and you would never part with it. But then the investment side of it, that's massive. So we'll talk about Conor McGregor, but you can also use it as a carrot if you're trying to attract a top manager and say, well, come in for 3 years, but we would expect that in this time period we're actually going to be joining this, and we're already down the line in the proposals and the negotiations. I also believe that's part of the reason Peter Lawwell's going to stay at Celtic, because he's going to be tasked with the BSL, the British Super League. He's going to be tasked with that. And I also think it's part of the Colts, because if it wasn't, why have we not really pursued that with so much gusto in the past? We've had so many years where we could have pushed for a Colts team in the Scottish leagues. The first time we proposed the idea was in 1968. So why is it so relevant now? And I think it all ties in to the one big thing, which is the British Super League. And by God, it'll be a big bulletin that day when that's announced, because I'm pretty sure there'll be plenty of fans unhappy with it. We've spoken about losing the identity of the football club and things like that, Natasha. But do you feel that massive key element of Celtic Football Club's future is playing a part in a lot of the goings on at the club at the moment?
Absolutely. Any competent business, any competent board, that's a discussion for another time. Look to the future, not just 1 year down the line, 2 years, 5 years, 10 years, longer, and think about, trends, where things are going, how best to put the business in the best position to meet what's happening in these next 5-10 years. That's what the board will be looking to. If they see that the end goal somewhere along that path is the sort of British Super League, they have to get prepared for that now, and they start having to put plans in place that allow us to be in the best position possible for when something like that does happen. So I do think this idea of the Colts team certainly has that in mind, and certainly has this sort of change and restructure thinking at the forefront of their minds. Whether it's good for Scottish football or whether it's good for Celtic is perhaps another debate we could have. I can see it both sides. I think it would be good. I think it would be good for both. This cash injection that the lower league is getting is massive for them, and I don't see another opportunity for them to have such a cash injection, and that has to be seen as a benefit. I see the concerns that they have, and I recognise them, but I just think that the positives, not only for the lower league clubs but also for Celtic, selfishly, outweigh the concerns that they have.
Definitely. We're going to speak about the Colts team, Lawrence. Before I do that, I'll ask you, will Celtic be using that as a carrot to the likes of Eddie Howe? We have bigger plans in place here. We do look to be moving out of Scottish football.
Don't know if they'd mentioned moving out of Scottish football. How I know there'll be an NDA signed, but I don't know. I think that information would be kept within the club. Bigger plans and talk about Europe, perhaps, but if it's going to be a BSL, I don't think they'll release that particular piece of information. I think that doesn't matter what NDA is signed. I think that'd be too risky for them to get out. I think that'll be kept close to probably Dermot, Peter, and maybe one or two other, maybe Michael Nicholson and someone else in the club, just whoever's tasked with that bring it on board. Obviously, Mike will do the legal, Peter will do the negotiation, and Dermot and maybe someone else. But I think that'd be, or should be, sewn up pretty tightly if that's where the move's going to be.
When we are looking at the Colts team, then I've heard a lot of criticism around this being for the benefit of just two clubs. Now, although there's a kind of attitude, if you speak to anyone who doesn't support Celtic or Rangers, they do have that kind of idea in their mind that everything is to the benefit of the two big Glasgow clubs. And it's interesting actually to see how others view us as a football club when you speak to a Hearts fan or a Dundee United fan. And there was actually a very good Play On Scottish football show on the channel on Monday night, and the three guys on it, brilliant actually. I think they're a good mix, but they're all Jambos, they're all Hearts fans, and so you get an idea of how other fans view Celtic Football Club trying to get a Colts team into the league. Do you subscribe to that, Lawrence, that it is only for the benefit of Celtic and Rangers? I'm not sure if you're thinking or if you're frozen. I'm not sure. Sorry, you froze there for a second, Lawrence.
I think we're only doing it because it benefits us. I don't think we're doing it because of spin-off benefits, although I agree with Natasha, there will be spin-off benefits. But I think our motivation is purely selfish. Yeah. So,
I agree. I think it is, but then in order to sell it to the league, you're going to give them all the benefits, and the benefits would be obviously the bounty of 50 grand, because in that league they don't have any prize money. So you win the league, you don't get prize money for it. So at the moment, that's 50 grand the clubs don't have. You then look at potential broadcasting deals, be that virtual broadcasting deal or, some kind of channel who wants to cover it. I think it'd be fantastic for the league if that were to happen. And sponsorship, a lot of these clubs, they really are on a shoestring. I mean, when you look at some of the clubs in the top league who operate on a shoestring, and in the Championship, Dunfermline have had an insight into the way the club is run very well now, I've got to say. But everything, it's pounds and pence, and it's very tight. They've had some really big investment actually from a German group, one of whom was involved in St. Pauli. So I would love to see the Pars, probably Mickey Mikiewicz would need to work on the designs for some St. Pauli-esque merch for Dunfermline Athletic. But when you're looking at the financial element of that, I know that the deal is for one season only, Natasha. Is that so that Celtic and Rangers can say after the season's up, look at what you've got as a result of us being here? And that could also be in the gate receipts, going along to the games. It's like you say, that thrill to be back in a football stadium, that's something that I don't think we took it for granted, but we've definitely looked at it over the last year. And I will be going to watch Celtic's women team next season. I will be watching the Colts if possible, as well as the first team. So gate receipts, sponsorship, broadcasting deal, plus the bounty. After the first season, I'm pretty sure they'll be looking to renegotiate that.
Yeah, I think that Celtic and Rangers must be very confident that it is going to work. So you can pitch it to them as a 1 year thing. And if it doesn't work, we'll reassess. It's just 1 year. What have you got to lose? They're obviously very confident that these clubs are going to be impressed after 1 year, that it is going to work after 1 year, that they are going to see the benefits. And Celtic and Rangers must think that they only need to get in the door, show them what they can achieve by allowing this, and then it'll flow smoothly from there. And I think they're probably right, to be honest. Like you've said, I think once these teams see the benefits that can come from this, they will realise that it helps them as well, and that they will be happy to sort of renegotiate a deal for years going down. All Celtic need to do is prove it over 1 year and see where it goes from there. And I think they will. I think that it will be a good thing, not only for Celtic, but for the rest of the league as well. I see some of the other sort of, wider, fringe complaints about the fact that these Colts players could be going to enhance some of these lower league teams instead. Some of the, lower league, the Championship League One teams who do take players from Celtic, they do take players from Rangers and supplement their own teams with them. And that's quite, an important source for them. Similarly to we look to Europe for these sort of players, or we take loan players from Man City. These lower teams look to the clubs like Celtic and Rangers, and if we're starting Colts teams, they lose that stream of player coming in. So I get that concern as well, but we're a Celtic state of mind in here, and I'm going to be selfish. I like the idea of all the players sticking together, playing together in one Colts team, playing under a Celtic umbrella, learning to play in the same way. A much smoother transition to the first team if they've already been part of a Celtic team. So for me, I like it. I understand the concerns of some of the teams, but I like it.
There's another big kind of question around whether or not, Lawrence, this is another way of ensuring that Celtic have a presence in Scottish football. Should we go to the British Super League? But I also look at a lot of the top European managers who, I'm going to use an example in Rafa Benitez. So you start off your managerial career in the B team. You're managing a B team, the reserves. And if you do well in the B team, you might make the step up to the first team. So also might implement a structure that at the moment we really don't have, do we? I mean, yeah, you can get promoted from within, but I don't think that always necessarily works in the modern game. But if you're a success and the actual approach of a Celtic team, the style of a Celtic team, the idea would be that any right back could step up to the first team because they know the style of play and it goes right down the ages. And I think all the big clubs implement that well. Benitez might not be a good example because apparently he's only interested in the first 11 that he picks on a Saturday. But do you think it's also a way of getting a young manager experience? And again, you then don't expect that manager to leave elsewhere. He might be the next Celtic manager. Do you think that could be a process, or do you think there would be far too much of the view that it's only Scotland's fifth tier? If you do well in there, it shouldn't really mean that you're good enough to be the Celtic manager.
Depends how well he does, doesn't it? Depends on the situation at the time. But whoever the manager's going to be, you can't argue he's getting experience in a competitive environment. Same with the players. Mm-hmm. Whether they can make the step up, who knows? But they're doing it away from the pressure of Celtic first team. So it's definitely a benefit. It reduces the risk to Celtic. If you were to make the choice to step up, at least you've seen them in a competitive environment, whether it's player or manager. And I suppose in any change, you want to reduce the risk, don't you? And if it's something that can reduce risk for us, brilliant.
Definitely. The comments are still coming in around Eddie Howe. As we've said, we're throwing a cat amongst the pigeons by saying it's going to be a big Wednesday this week. You and Stars, we need to announce Howe sooner rather than later, or this rebuild will be even longer than we think. Not long to go till the Champions League qualifiers. I think tomorrow, or Thursday rather, it will be 68 days, if my maths is right, from last week. JP will let us know. And we will need to get a fit team by then. Absolutely. Ewan now, the outgoing manager, the departed manager rather, and Neil Lennon, some feel that the narrative of a Celtic state of mind has been very much in favour of Lennon's departure. So we're going to open that up tomorrow on the Dial-In show, Natasha. We are going to ask a very vocal Celtic supporter to come on the show and offer us the case for the defence tomorrow. He's going to come in and defend Neil Lennon, and that's going to be part of the Dial-In show. So fantastic to get other people's views on it, isn't it?
That's it. We always like to have different viewpoints on the show, and maybe we do all think too similarly. You might not see that. We do disagree a lot in here. I saw it on Sunday. I've seen it before. We do disagree in here. But it's always nice to hear from other people, other supporters who do have a completely different narrative. And let's not make it a one-way discussion. Let's hear the other narrative and hear other views about why the season unfolded the way it did. We always like to challenge our own viewpoints here on ACSOM. So the Dial-In show on Wednesdays is a great idea. I like having other supporters come on and listen to other people's opinions. Make sure you consider your own sometimes as well. Expand your own knowledge, expand your own thoughts. So always grateful for people coming on a Wednesday.
Definitely, and we are open to that, and we keep saying it. We've got Wednesday's guests lined up for this week, but keep sending the emails. If I've not got back to you yet, I definitely will. I'll get back to everybody that gets in touch, and we'll get everybody lined up and get you involved. Other discussion points for tomorrow will include Scott Coyle's coming on from the Belgian football podcast. He's going to come on and talk about Jack Hendry. He's going to give us a blow-by-blow account of Hendry's season, and he's going to give us his opinion on whether or not Jack Hendry has a future at Celtic. And I think it's important to speak to someone who has got a keen eye on the game and has seen a lot more football that Jack Hendry's played this season. I can almost see the comments coming in saying, Paul, would you shut up about Jack Hendry coming back to Celtic? But, I've already given you the supposed lineup for the first fixture in 68 days, and Hendry's in it at the moment. If Ayer was to leave. Lawrence, you were a massive supporter of Neil Lennon. I think you were one of the last ACSOM contributors to concede that his time was up. Will you be looking forward to seeing some of the reasons for the defence tomorrow?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, listen, I think we've acknowledged a lot of them on here. He didn't get to pick his backroom staff. He didn't get his first 3 choices of transfers. He didn't get wingers when he asked for them. So I think we've explored all that. But even with those reasons, I think, there came a point, it was time for change.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, there is going to be a wee change because Natasha has other media commitments this afternoon. So thank you very much, Natasha. And we look forward to seeing how that goes when it's screened on BT Sport. Any idea when it's going to be?
Not yet. I'll let you know via Twitter. But I just want to remind everyone, ACSOM is definitely my priority. It is number 1. I did manage to still fit it in today, albeit cutting it slightly short. But yeah, no, hopefully by the next time I'm on, Eddie Howe will have been announced as manager and we can talk about that.
Yeah, absolutely. I look forward to that and all the best for today. Thanks, Natasha. Thank you. Now, Lawrence, you were the subject of conversation yesterday, I think it was, in fact, it was Sunday on the ACSOM Bulletin. So we'll have a wee chat about your thoughts on that as well. Not in a bad way, I've got to say. But I have been talking about the potential signings that Celtic will be making and the change in transfer strategy. So Colin Watt and I go toe-to-toe on the Lewis Ferguson debate. That's fine. It's all about opinions. I think he would be a good addition. But a lot of the names that seem to be getting targeted or certainly linked to Celtic, Ali McCann of St Johnstone, Josh Doig of Hibs, Lewis Ferguson of Aberdeen, Alan Campbell of Motherwell, as well as Jamie McGrath at St Mirren. Not all Scottish players as such, but all in the Scottish game, Lawrence. Is that where we're going to be this pre-season?
Surely, someone like Ferguson is on the shortlist for Young Player of the Year. Crazy not to look at him. It just... we've got to look at all markets, and we should have a great knowledge of the Scottish game. It's easier for us to cover it as a club. But for me, I'd definitely take Lewis Ferguson. I think he would improve by moving to a better team. He'd had a bit of steel that's been missing. High energy player. As I said, he's on a short list for a Young Player of the Year, Young Player of the Year for a reason. So yeah. Definitely grab him, and I think a market Celtic need to be farming better than
I think so. Yeah, I think so, Lawrence. I just, David Turnbull is the shining example of that, isn't he? He's come in, and some might say that his earlier performances were better after the Lille game, that is. Possibly, but he's been playing in a struggling side. And I think the very fact that he was nominated for the Young Player of the Year award, of which obviously Josh Doig won, then it shows you that he's made a good positive impact, and I'm looking forward to seeing him progressing next season as well. Some have said today on Twitter on the subject of Alan Campbell, for example, that Soro will be playing a lot more games next season, and he will. But we're going to have to strengthen just about every position. Throughout the team, and I like the look of all these players, and I think that when you look at the success of Turnbull, and you look at the successes of some of the Scottish-based players that we missed out on as well, Lawrence, I'm not going to go through them because it's the same old names, but we missed out on them, and they've gone on to have phenomenal careers. If you don't go and buy someone like Josh Doig this pre-season, and he goes down south and he does a Robertson, he'll never play for Celtic because he'll be way out of our price range, and when you're looking at the wages, we just can't afford the player once he's gone down to the English riches. So I think the time is now for a player like Josh Doig.
Yeah, definitely. I don't see why we wouldn't look at someone that's already excelled in the Scottish game. They've proven they can handle the environment up here, the style of football up here. And yeah, would we ever sign John McGinn now? I doubt it, as you've touched on, for wages, unless the British Super League happens or there's another change in the way I was going to call it the Champions League, but we better find a different name for it. I don't know, Europe's Premier competition, I don't know. It's structured, then perhaps if we can tap into money, then we can compete. But as it sits just now, yeah, once they're in the Premier League, it's kind of hard for us to compete.
It is. Yeah, it's almost impossible, Lawrence. And you've got that ambition, the burning ambition of domestic players who generally will be a fan, you would think, of ourselves or Rangers, obviously. Not always, but a huge percentage of them will be. And John McGinn wanted to play for Celtic. He, made that pretty clear. He wanted to sign for the club. He's obviously his grandfather had been the chairman at the club. He'd been a long association with the family. He wanted to play for Celtic, and he made it clear. And you know, the money, and I know it was a few years before, but the money we were talking about, we spent more than that to bring Patrick Klimala to the club, Lawrence. You know, so I think the strategy, the transfer policy, you know, it's run its course and it needs to change. And I think a big part, not solely, but a big part will be domestic purchases.
Yeah, definitely. Listen, I think McGinn's not daft. He knew it was probably a case of now or never for Celtic at that point in his career. You know, because he knew that he was good enough to play in the EPL. So perhaps he play for Celtic, tick that off the box, and then get a move. Because he knows once he's down there on the bigger wages, Celtic can't afford them. You know, and I think there's a few other players we maybe missed out in the past. McCarthy being one that people are talking about coming now. You're like, I'm not so sure.
He's so injury prone now. By the way, if I keel over, Lawrence, you're going to have to finish the show because I got my vaccine today, which is a bit of a contradiction when I've got an Ian Brown mug, because I don't think Ian Brown's going to be getting his vaccine anytime soon, going by his Twitter account. However, I did, and it's not kicked in yet, but if it does, and I keel over, sing us a song or do something, keep us amused. But let's have a wee chat, because Tony was talking about the fact that there was a comment came through in the comment section saying that we owe Scottish football nothing. We should show no loyalty to Scottish football. The SFA have always hounded us and treated us different set of standards. And if we get an opportunity to get out of Scottish football, we should do so. So that was the point that was made, and we threw it out to the contributors on A Celtic State of Mind. Tony disagreed. He felt that there should be a loyalty to the Scottish game. And that a lot of the scenarios or the theories around the treatment at Celtic were conspiratorial in nature. And I just said, I'm going to pick this up with Lawrence, and we can have a wee chat about Jim Farrick, etc. In a nutshell, when you look at any opportunity to move the club elsewhere, I'm with Natasha on this. I would be selfish as a Celtic fan. I would be totally selfish, and I would want to be in a situation where the club is as good as it can possibly be. It achieves as much as it can possibly achieve. So that's bigger than any player, any manager, or any loyalty to a specific league. I think personally, and I might get criticised for this, if that opportunity arises in the next 3 years, next couple of years, Celtic should take it. And it wouldn't be waving the Scottish game goodbye, because I think we've already got our Trojan horse in there. We've already got the Scottish representatives as of next season in the Colts team. I think that is all part of the bigger and wider plan. What would your view be? I know Colin Watt, he's against it. He would much rather we stayed in the Scottish game. He likes the kind of romanticism of playing at these old Scottish grounds and travelling around the country. I think there might be a newer fan base who would be of the view, Lawrence, let's get ourselves in amongst the big guns, the English Premier League. What's your thoughts on it?
Yeah, for me, you've got to do what's best for the club, and I suppose best is subjective, but if you look at what's happening in Holland and Belgium, are they Ajax have abandoned Dutch football? Would we be any less Scottish by playing in a British league? It's, things change. We've got to move with the times. If we do have ambitions to be the best and get back to the top in Europe, it's a move that needs to be made. We need to find an income stream from somewhere and a football environment that's going to allow us to achieve that. And I don't think that's ever going to be Scotland.
I think
Scotland.
The worlds are going to align. There's going to be a real set of circumstances, Lawrence, that will leave Celtic with a decision to make. And a massive part of that is going to be the very reason I went for a vaccine this morning. It's going to be COVID, the lockdown, the loss of earnings, the loss of income over the last year. That's going to play a massive part, because then, if the situation arises, as a result of that, opportunities will arise, because there's going to be other clubs down south as well who are going to go to the wall. That much is true. I don't know what Scottish football is going to look like in a year's time. So I think there's going to be a very specific set of circumstances that will never present themselves again, and will give Celtic the opportunity to flee the nest, as it were. And I've heard a lot of Scottish football fans of other clubs saying, don't let the door hit your backside on the way out. But I think there's a naivety. There's a certain element of naivety in that as well, Lawrence, because I think Celtic would be a massive loss to the Scottish game. But they will use that Celtic Colts team, by which time, who will be able to be promoted after season 1, I would expect, through the divisions, to say, well, we are still investing in the Scottish game. We've got a team in the Scottish League pyramid who are going to go through the leagues, who are going to invest in. We're going to still bring attendances to your football grounds. And I think it's all part of this bigger plan.
Well, I mean, you've touched on circumstances. I suppose the UK government politically, a British league would probably suit them now more than ever. And who's to say that Aberdeen might not have ambitions to play in it at some point, or Hearts, or Hibs, or any club in Scotland's top league? What will the pyramid structure look like? Would there be an opportunity for other Scottish clubs to eventually move into it and feed it? I don't think it's kind of only Celtic and Rangers that, perhaps initially that might be the only move, but I don't think it would stop at that. You know, I think it would change the structure of football. Now, whether I think then the Scottish Premiership, the other clubs that it would push, whether it be, you know, a promotion to the Championship or promotion to the EPA or BPL as it would be. I don't think it'd be just Scottish and Rangers, Celtic and Rangers that push for that. I think all Scottish clubs at the top will look at the money there. Why should we be excluded from it?
They might want a piece of the pie, I guess. I don't think English football would entertain it. I really don't. I think they would entertain Celtic and Rangers, and I'm using both teams because, you know, whatever you may think in relation to any alliance, and I don't think there is any alliance between the clubs. There certainly used to be a business alliance back in the day, previously. However, English football, for them, for the broadcasters, for the sponsors and for the league, I think it's all about Celtic and Rangers. I don't think they would really be interested in a Hibs or a Hearts, even though they're capital clubs. You know, when you look at the support, Lawrence, the worldwide fan base, the brand, is it going to enhance the brand? And then, you know, other clubs I don't think would be, in England, would be up for that move either.
So what would happen if Celtic and Rangers get demoted? You know, where are they going to go? Is it the Championship they'd then go to?
Yeah, it would be part of the English football pyramid then, wouldn't it?
So why couldn't the other clubs?
They don't drop you back in. No, the point you're making is a good one, because the Atlantic League, remember Alan McDonald was raving about that, and it was 9 nations, was it not? Did they not call them G9? I think it was the 9 nations. But you're if you were relegated back into your domestic league. That's the way that works.
So the UK pyramid structure could change. You know, politically, it would probably be an expedient time to do it. I know outside of the kind of 4 home nations, a lot of the national associations are a bit frustrated at 4 home nations getting national teams. They should say it should only be a GB team. So there could be wider moves ahead of it. I don't see why it should only be Celtic and Rangers. I can see they would be the main draw, but see Aberdeen, Hearts, Hibs going, well, why couldn't we get part of that? You know, wouldn't our crowds go up if we got season in the Championship? What kind of standard of players could we afford? What could it do for our club? So, you know, I think COVID's going to put everything on the table, isn't it?
It definitely is. Yeah. All bets are off, as they say, because obviously it's been written off time and time again, Lawrence, but circumstantially this is something that will be on the table at some point in the not too distant future. And I'm pretty sure the fact that Peter Lawwell's potentially staying at Celtic is one of the reasons why he'll be staying at Celtic. It will be to bring those negotiation skills to the table in relation to Celtic's proposal out of Scottish football. Now, I'm going to ask you a question. We've spoken, and quite rightly so, about Scott Brown over the last week or so. His Celtic career is coming to an end. And, you know, the successes that he's had, trophy-laden successes as a captain at Celtic, making over 600 appearances for the club. One of only 12 Celtic players in the history of the club to make over 500 appearances. I've called him a legend. Some have disagreed with that. It's hard to define a legend. I think Scott Brown personifies that. He's not had the best of seasons, of course he's not, but that's not, I don't think that's what we'll remember Scott Brown of. But there was an incident as he was in the tunnel after Rangers' latest victory against Celtic, the 4-1 game. And, you know, it was involving a Rangers official, Lawrence, whereby they were goading Scott Brown. And you look at that situation, and you think, well, that's what's going to happen now. Celtic Football Club, the players, the fans, everybody associated with the club will be goaded by the Rangers support, the players, the officials, because that's what they're going to do unless we are able to wrestle that mantle back to Celtic Park. Do you think that, not that incident, I'm just talking about the very fact that we have allowed this club to take Celtic's title away after 9 years of domination, and it's going back to one of the points that was made earlier about the investment. Do you think Celtic will go all out to ensure, because people are saying, how much investment will you need to topple Rangers? We just need a good manager. This is a team that has the momentum of a season that in the league anyway could well be unbeaten. Lawrence, will they strengthen? I'm pretty sure they will, moving into trying to get more riches in the Champions League. And it's not about looking over your shoulder at what the opposition's doing, but we cannot allow the complacency to continue at Celtic. We really need to go into the transfer market in a big way, be that the Scottish talents we've spoken about, supplementing and complementing them with players from overseas, but we cannot be complacent in this.
No, I'm looking at the team and I think we need a new keeper. First choice centre half, first choice centre mid, and first choice centre forward. You need a whole new spine. I know kind of people maybe look at Brendan, and when Brendan came in and Jock Stein came in, they didn't sign a lot of players themselves, but I don't think the squad was as threadbare or as it's been allowed to become just now.
Yeah,
if you're to look at the spine of our team, do you see a spine? Aya's possibly going. I don't fancy it at centre half. I think he'd be better at right back anyway. Scott Brown's moved on. Eddie will be going. And when we look at three keepers,
there's a lot of fringe players, and the term fringe player could include players like Tom Rogic, Nir Beaton, Olivier Nchamini comes back. There's a lot of players of that ilk, Lawrence, that I expect to go. And when you look at the potential earnings of selling Nchamini a year ago to Porto, or 18 months ago to Porto, they're talking about £8 million for him back then. And you ask yourself, how much could we actually get? We'll end up losing money on Olivier Nchamini. Such has been not just the poor performances, but also the circumstances in terms of football finance moving into next season. So, we did a dedicated podcast on looking at the squad, all the different options, who's going to leave, who's going to stay, and upwards of a dozen players will be leaving the building. If you really were to be brutal, up to 18 players might be leaving the building. That includes all the loanees as well, and a few kind of younger players, Lawrence. So the investment, and I spoke about this the last time, Celtic were in a situation where we stopped the 10. Rangers have done it this time. We stopped the 10. Rangers went out and spent £35 million under Advocaat. That's equivalent to £55 million in today's money. So we're never going to be putting that kind of investment in. Is it more of a 2 or 3 year kind of programme that Celtic are going to look at? And if so, will Celtic fans actually accept that? These are kind of some of the questions I hope that will be asked and answered on Thursday night during the forum with Dominic Mackay.
Well, any investment is something you want to return on. And I suppose your return is going to be over the length of that player's contract. So if we've got plans for a BPL, it may increase the amount that we're willing to invest because we'll get a better return. So depending on what we think the likelihood of that is going to affect how much we invest. A lot of players leaving, a lot of them in big wages that are leaving. At least it'll lower the wage bill and give us something to play with on that side. We've talked about the new manager needs to be developing youth, giving them a way into the team. There's a lot of players you might say have been good servants like Nir Beaton, but if he hadn't been there, might Stephen Welsh have started sooner? Might have got more experience. Might have been other centre-halves that have been at the club that might have got a chance and done a job, or even if it's only been a job for a season or two, then moved on. But it'd have built that youth pathway sooner. So I suppose there's a lot of variables, but if it's investment, you're talking investment's only made for return, isn't it? And our return is going to very much depend on what competitions we're in, whether that's Champions League or BPL.
But the big problem that we've had previously, Lawrence, and a lot of Celtic fans' frustration lies with us, is that we've hedged our bets on the squad, hoping that we can scrape through the qualifiers into the riches of the Champions League group stages. We didn't make the investment that we hoped would be made to ensure our passage into the Champions League group stages. That must have been a massive frustration for Brendan Rodgers, and I'll ask him that question if I'm ever privileged enough to interview him, because I do keep asking Leicester for access to Brendan. I think that would be a fascinating interview. Now, I've got to say, tomorrow's dial-in show, it's the Wednesday dial-in show for a Celtic State of Mind. We had a lot of people going on about you should really go for a phone-in. No chance, I'm not doing that. Yeah, that'd be impossible to do a phone-in show. But what we have decided to do is we've taken all the feedback on board, and we're doing a dial-in show. Lawrence, and it needs to be managed. Of course, it needs to be managed. We're not putting any plants in, but the first couple of weeks to try and trial the concept and the format of it. We've had people like Kevin McCluskey, Alan Morrison, Kevin Graham even, and to prove that he wasn't AWOL. And also tomorrow we'll have David Slight. David Slight has contributed in the past to a Celtic State of Mind. But another couple of really interesting guests tomorrow, and I'm allowed to say this, a person of interest on Twitter, because there are some very interesting Twitter accounts out there, Lawrence, and you're not quite sure who they might be, but obviously Celtic-minded. They're of a Celtic state of mind stock. So we will be speaking to at Great Pantheon 18, who wants to tell us why Neil Lennon obviously deserves a defence. There might be a narrative, he thinks, and others may think, that ACSOM has had throughout a season where get Lenny out, and I don't subscribe to that. I did want Neil Lennon to leave. I wanted Celtic to make the change. I did. I said that. There was never anything personal in respect of Neil Lennon's character. So, yeah, we'll be taking Great Pantheon 18's views on board, and we'll be putting them out there for people to comment on. And we'll also be speaking to Scott Coyle, who will be giving us the lowdown on Jack Hendry. Because, again, I've thrown it out there a few times, and Celtic fans have criticised Hendry and said he's no good enough. We'll be asking Scott, who has a keen eye on Belgian football, as he appears on the Belgian Football Podcast. Should Jack Hendry come back to Celtic, will he be able to contribute? Lawrence Connolly. So that'll be an interesting one tomorrow. If you want to get involved in future editions of the Big Dial-In on ACSOM, please get in touch, because it happens every single Wednesday. In actual fact, I'll be presenting that one tomorrow with Amy. Colin will be joining us at night time for the game against St Johnstone. I hate talking about Celtic games, Lawrence, being dead rubbers. I really do. It frustrates the life out of me, because no Celtic game for me is a dead rubber. Every game means something. You always want to win the game. How are we going to approach this? We've been saying this for a while. Are we going to do anything different? Are we going to throw in a few players to give them game time? Do you expect Kennedy just to be true to form, start with Scott Brown, sentimentality, same old, same old?
Yeah, I think that's exactly what John's going to do. And if he does try something different, I think it's going to be even more frustrating. Go, listen, you actually had a chance when that would have been the payoff for you, but you could have demonstrated you could try something different and deliver something. I think he's been named Lenny Day now, because nothing changed. It's just, it was for me, it's a losing strategy for John. If I don't change anything, well, how much we just not realise by not changing anything? If you don't change anything and you win, well, was it really you? Because everything's much the same. If you don't change anything and you lose, well, but if you change something and you win, well, that was you, wasn't it? And I think he missed that opportunity. Some might say, it was limited by players. I think something's hampered us all season as wingers been missing. So, hopefully James is playing. You never know. He may surprise us and start Mikey as well, but I doubt it. I think it's just it's going to be the same old from.
Well, I fear it will be. What we will see, we'll be covering the game. Colin Watt will be joining us. Laura Bradburn will be covering the St Johnstone game. We'll also be covering the women's game against Glasgow City, who are going for 14 in a row. So yeah, Zinko Vix comes in to say, I'm off tomorrow. This should be good. I think it will be. People are looking at Great Pantheon 18's Twitter account as we speak. It is a locked account. But yeah, he's given his views over the season. He or she has given their views over the season, and they'll be joining us tomorrow and any comments or questions that come in, I will also be throwing them out to our contributors as well. So let's have also a wee look at the story. I'm keen to hear your thoughts on this one, Lawrence, because we spoke about this yesterday with Anthony Haggerty. There was a story that broke on Twitter. It was a Q&A with Conor McGregor, and they were talking about Conor investing in Manchester United. I came into work the following day and I seen the story breaking on Sky Sports, obviously ran with the Manchester United line. And they spoke to someone who is involved in one of the Manchester United channels who was going on about scenes. This must be kind of like a young term that all the young kids use these days, Lawrence. Scenes at Old Trafford if Conor McGregor was involved. I was looking at it thinking, well, you know, he mentioned Celtic there. And, you know, as I say, I'm looking at this big picture of the British Super League. Anybody who wants to invest in Celtic would be doing so with a view to making a buck or two on their investment. But I also don't like the idea of, you know, Celtic being a plaything, Celtic being a fashion accessory almost, Lawrence. And we do see a lot of that, don't we? We see, you know, McGregor in the ring wearing a Kieran Tierney top and sparring and all this kind of stuff. And as much as it's good, because you're saying all the cool dudes and all the creative people out there are Celtic fans, I do sometimes feel as though they're just using it. I mean, how often have they been at Celtic Park?
Well, to be honest, the Scotland in the news again, hasn't it? You know, he's good at marketing himself, Conor McGregor. No one can deny that. Would I want him running the club? Who would be better to run the club? And I've got to say Dermot Desmond. You know, I'd choose him 120 times out of 100 if it was between him and Conor McGregor. But yeah, I wouldn't like to think of Celtic becoming anyone's plaything, which I suppose we've given Desmond a fair amount of criticism. But at least he runs this as a business and doesn't put us in danger of going bust and getting liquidated and dying. You know, he knows what he's doing with a club, which I would fear that anyone coming in and used it as a plaything may put us at risk. Which, you know, you wouldn't want. And what happens when they get bored, or what happens when they move on? They've got something new. Who then funds the club or funds the contracts that they've got us into? Do you take some kind of dodgy scheme to come up with the finances to do that?
My biggest concern has always been, and I think that Kevin Graham speaks quite well about it, in relation to the faceless entities that might run your football club, you know, and be careful what you wish for and all of these different things that we can associate with that. But we'll wrap up there, Lawrence, by saying that we hope it's a big Wednesday tomorrow, and if it is, we'll be covering it in detail. Join us for the dial-in. I'll be presenting it with Amy Canavan, and we'll be talking to various Celtic fans coming on to offer their views on things such as Neil Lennon, the case for the defence, Jack Hendry, should he come back to Celtic next season, and various other points. So get involved. Thank you for getting involved today on YouTube, Facebook and Twitter. Keep following us, subscribe to us on YouTube as well. We're growing the channel. There's loads and loads of plans to grow this channel and develop it out of lockdown, because we've done most of this during a lockdown phase, and hopefully we can develop it even further once we're allowed to leave the cell that I've been sitting in for the last 12 months or so. All that's left for me to say, Lawrence Connolly, thanks again for joining me on A Celtic State of Mind.